to work out exactly how the timing works when you start a YouTube live stream. I feel like you probably just saw me looking at my computer and then switching it to the starting screen, and then the starting screen coming up, and then here I am. How's it going? It is Monday, the 3rd of April. God, this year's going so fast. It was my birthday yesterday, so I should know what date it was. Thank you to everyone that turned out for the birthday streams and things like that. In today's episode of the podcast, this is the 4th episode of the podcast, and for anyone who doesn't know, the Geeky Pastimes podcast is every weekday at 9 a.m, and we talk about gaming news, we talk about some maybe controversial issues within gaming, also talk about films, TV, games that I've been playing over the last week, or watching, I guess, and then things that we're going to be doing in the next few days as well. So we talk about a little bit of everything. Today, we're going to talk about gaming leaks, something that's obviously been a kind of hot topic within my community for the last 3 years or so. Something that is very close to my heart, something that I care about way more than I should, and it causes me way more grief than it gives me pleasure, I imagine. But we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about copyright laws and streaming, and that originally was going to be like the main topic of this episode. But I decided kind of a little bit later that maybe that sounds a little bit dry. Copyright doesn't sound exciting. And unless you actually stream, I'm not sure how much, how relevant it is to people. But I'll be interested to chat to people about that a little bit. So people in chat, I'd be interested to hear your opinions about it. And we're also going to talk about a couple of new games that I'll be playing this week. There's not a lot coming out this week. I think the next huge game release is Dead Island 2. Which is in 2 weeks maybe, but we've got a couple of little bits that we're going to be having a look at, so we'll talk about that too. But let's start with the main topics. This is always the one that takes the absolute longest, and that is gaming leaks. Now, the reason that I wanted to talk about this today is that I've already started seeing people doing the normal sort of cycle of things for Call of Duty, where I play a lot of Call of Duty, I stream a lot of Call of Duty, I make videos about Call of Duty, and whenever Call of Duty gets kind of near the end of a cycle, so near the end of a season or near the end of a game or whatever, the leaks start coming out. The leaks start getting pushed out. And there's always been this kind of attitude from the leaking community, as in from the people who like to leak this stuff and share those leaks, and also from the people that just like to see them, that it's like, oh, well, it's up to you if you look at them. It's up to you if you engage with them. It's, your choice if you want to see leaks or not. And obviously I might be in a slightly different position, but it's not really for me. For me, at least, people will come into chat sometimes and blurt stuff out. Not because they're doing it maliciously, but just because they don't know me. Maybe it's the first time seeing the stream and they're excited about something and they want to talk to people about it. Or people will post stuff in a Discord, or people will send me Twitter DMs being like, hey, have you seen this? And then all of that problem is compounded by Twitter lately constantly reverting back to the For You page, and it's like, hey, you engage with a lot of Call of Duty creators, you want to see stuff from Modern Warzone or Who's Immortal or Charlie Intel, sites that post a lot of leaked stuff. So it becomes very hard to avoid any of this stuff just because it's shared on social media, particularly for Call of Duty. So already I start getting things in my YouTube recommendations. It'll be videos where the thumbnail and the title are just spoiling things for supposedly, what's going to happen in season 3 or what's going to happen in the future of Call of Duty. I know, with every year's Call of Duty, whenever there's a new Call of Duty title coming out, normally it's around this time of year when we find out what it's called, we find out what the theme is, and then we don't get anything official about it, for months. Sometimes, I think Black Ops Cold War, we didn't find out until August officially what that game was. But we'd had Charlie Intel and Modern Warzone tweeted about it for months and months by that point. So it's kind of, when they do the big reveal, which, for me, Black Ops Cold War was an awesome reveal because they did it with Pawn Takes Pawn. They did it in-game. The first trailer was in-game. It was all very exciting. And then, annoyingly, it was kind of, oh yeah, this is the game that we already knew about. This was the game that we'd already been told about repeatedly. So that was kind of a shame. That was to me at least, that was kind of stopped it being very exciting, because it wasn't oh wow, what's this new thing? Oh my god, they're doing another Black Ops game. Oh, it's but it's not Black Ops 5, it's something different. It was more oh, this is the trailer for that thing we already know about. Okay, cool. It's much less exciting. And this isn't just a Call of Duty problem. I talk about Call of Duty a lot more because that's probably closest to my heart. But I've been not fighting, that's far too much of a strong word. I've been having this kind of discussion a little bit over the weekend because like my my sister-in-law's partner was saying like, he'd watched a new Zelda trailer. So this isn't even a leak. This is like going away from leaks. This is going into just what I would consider spoiler territory. So like he's watched a new Zelda trailer, the Nintendo Direct, which is obviously an officially put out thing. I just chose I didn't want to watch it. I didn't want to see it. I'm kind of all in. I want to buy Zelda. I'm going to play it. So I'm like, I want to discover stuff as I play the game. And he was immediately like, I don't talk to him that often, so he doesn't quite know how I am about this stuff. Was immediately like, oh, did you see this in the Nintendo trailer? Did you see this in the Zelda trailer? Like, this is the main thing. And I was like, no, I don't want to know about it. Like, I want to explore all this stuff, find it out myself. Like, I think that'll be more fun. And he was like, but you need to know like this, and this. And like, he didn't spoil anything for me. He was very respectful of it. But it's just kind of, it was so natural for him because it was like something that had been in the trailer. And similarly, like we were watching a theme park video yesterday that was like Universal's worst ever rides. And I'm a big theme park fan. I love theme parks. We go to theme parks a lot of the time, but often there's a bit of a delay between like when a new ride comes out and we can go on it. Often like years because traveling to the other side of the world to go on a theme park ride is often not the priority. And yeah, we were watching this video and it was like the worst theme park rides at Universal, and the picture was Fast and Furious and stuff. And we're like, okay, cool, we'll watch that because we've been on a load of bad rides at Universal. That'll be fine. And so we were watching this video, and then for the first 10 minutes, they started talking about like the stuff that we expected. And then he did a rundown of like, but look at these amazing rides. And he started like showing on-ride footage of like the new Mario World rides, which have just opened in LA. I know they've been open in Japan for a little while now. And it's like, I don't want to see those rides. I don't want to know what happens in those rides. I want to experience it when I go on the rides. But the person who made the video, I assume, was just like, oh, well, anyone who's like a theme park fan will have already been on these rides. So it's fine for me to just show everything. And we had a similar thing with the Tron ride at Disney, which kind of sucked. And then we've had it with the Super Mario Brothers movie. This was more of I would argue, is more of a leak. Is like on Eurogamer, which is the one of probably the only sort of gaming news website that I really read. Although I'm increasingly not reading it anymore because of stuff like this. They just posted like a headline saying like, hey, there's this surprise in the new Mario Brothers movie. And we've, spoken to the director about it or whatever. And it was like, but the movie's not even out yet. So it's like, you're literally 100% definitely spoiling that surprise for anyone that goes to your website. And it's not like, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, people always say, oh, you can avoid stuff. You can choose to avoid these spoilers. But it's like, that wasn't on like a movie site. It's not like I was going to a movie site to look up stuff about Super Mario Bros. I was on a video game news site, and they just decided to spoil something about the Mario Bros. Movie that even they were acknowledging would be a cool surprise if you didn't know about it. But it's like they were just like, oh, well, like this is what it is. And it's like, at what point does anyone think that this is more fun to find out by reading in a website headline? Or, when we going back to Call of Duty, which is probably where this conversation will focus on, going back to like talking about when is it more fun to find out about what the next Call of Duty game is in a tweet by Charlie Intel? Or when is it like more fun to find out about it when you see a YouTube thumbnail from GameSpot or IGN? Like, that's a crap way to find out. When you get these artists and creative people spending huge amounts of effort and money, really, making reveal trailers for games, it's never more fun to be like, oh, I saw that on Twitter earlier. When you see it on Twitter, you might be a little bit like, oh, that's cool. And then you see the reveal trailer and it's like, oh yeah, I knew about this. Whereas like if you had the reveal trailer and it was a complete surprise, you'd be like, oh my God, this is blowing my mind. This is like amazing. Those kind of, think of all of those surprises. People always talk about, we were talking about E3 dying last week. People always talk about, the great moments of E3. And they're nearly all crazy surprises. Things that you didn't know were going to be revealed. Things that you didn't know were going to happen. And yet still people search out these leaks and stuff like that. Now, I'm not so dense as to think that I don't understand why people do it. Like, curiosity is a very, very powerful thing. I'm talking about why people read the leaks. We'll get on to why people post leaks a bit later. But I understand why people want to read the leaks and why people want to share them and stuff like that. like going back to Call of Duty, think about like, you know, a lot of people are playing Call of Duty right now and they're not loving it. For whatever reason, there's a lot of people not having the best time with Call of Duty, whether it's Warzone or multiplayer or whatever, even DMZ. And so with season 3 being relatively soon, it's coming out what in 9 days, 8 days, something like that. But we don't have any real information about it other than what was revealed on the creator call in season 2. It's kind of like there's a lot of people who are like want to see if there's kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. They want to see if there's something to be excited about. You know, they don't want to wait for the reveal or something like that. And it's like I feel like most people, if you spoke to them, would acknowledge that it would be like it would be more fun to see what's new in a reveal trailer. But on the other hand, Call of Duty over the last year or so tend to have not done particularly exciting trailers. They tend to have revealed things by themselves in tweets. So it's like, what's the difference between reading it in a tweet in Charlie Intel, or what's the difference between reading it in a tweet from Call of Duty? Like, it seemed very strange for season 2. They did loads of tweets that were just like, hey, this is happening. And it's like, that's probably not the most exciting way to reveal that information. So it's like the idea that people just want to find out stuff sooner completely makes sense. And I've been like that. There's some things like I always talk about like being super against gaming leaks and spoilers and stuff like that. And it's not, I mean, I say it like that because it's easy to draw an arbitrary line where it's like absolutely not nothing. There are times when I'm curious about a game coming out. There's times where I'm like, I look up information about games where it's not official things. I look up leaks and stuff like that about certain games and certain titles. The big difference, I think, is that I don't share them. You know, I'm all about like, it's fine whatever you want to look at, but don't then make it so other people see it. So don't like those tweets, don't retweet those things, don't post them, don't talk about them in like public places like, you know, chats or on streams and stuff like that. So if I want to look at sort of like, you know, I want to find out what's happening with some of Ubisoft's games. You know, they've got that whole mess of games where they're kind of announced, but they haven't really shown anything off yet. And there's been like tests and things going on. Sometimes I want to see what's going on with those games. Are those games that I should be excited about and stuff like that? And I've given in and looked at leaks and stuff like that. And that's fine because I'm not going to go and talk about them to people. I'm not going to go and like share that information and then spoil it for someone else who might be waiting for the cool reveal trailers and stuff like that. Now, when we talk about why do people do it, obviously I've got a slightly unique perspective on this. As someone that is now very, very much against sharing leaks and posting stuff about leaks and talking about leaks on Twitter and social media and stuff like that, I did start off doing a lot of my streaming and a lot of my YouTube videos, especially by data mining in Call of Duty. Like I had, when I first started doing my whole YouTube thing, Geeky Pastimes and everything like that, there was like, we were doing the Easter eggs with Bunker 11. So we did Bunker 11. I helped to work on that. I wasn't the first person to solve it or anything like that, but I was part of a larger group who worked it out how to do it and everything like that. And then there was this weird time where because we'd only had Bunker 11, we hadn't had anything else, we were like, is there more? And at that point, Raven or Infinity Ward or whoever weren't talking about it. They weren't talking to the community about Bunker 11 at all. They weren't really acknowledging anything. And we didn't have any way of knowing whether there was something else. So some people started being like, well, we can data mine this. And it hadn't been data mined before. So as far as I know, before we got into Bunker 11, no one had known about it. No one had like data mined anything like that. But after we got in and we knew what we were looking for, people found it quite easy to find stuff. I think in the files for Bunker 11, everything was marked with like X1 or something. So you could just literally, like, for anyone who doesn't know, the data mining process, in Call of Duty at least, I've never seen what it's like in other games, but I imagine it's similar. The data mining process in Call of Duty requires like zero skill or expertise. It's literally like people download a tool that basically extracts all of the kind of bits of code that are strings and all of the textures and all of the sounds and all of the animations and stuff like that. So strings are bits of text. So things that you'd be able to read basically. And basically, you run the game, you run this little program that extracts all of those files because then all of the files are decompressed and unencrypted and whatever, and are there. And they dump all of these loads and loads and loads of files out into a folder. And then you use a different piece of software that just lets you search through them. And, you know, there's different pieces of software that can do it. Some of them is just simple, like a text search. So when we knew Bunker 11 was something to do with X1, we could just be like, oh, well, like that. I think they worked it out because it was like you could just look for the Russian numbers and then that would show you the subtitles. And then that was linked to X1. It's like, oh, now you just search for X1 and find everything to do with Bunker 11. And that's what people did. And they found like all of the stuff and were like, okay. And we could say straight away, we could be like, oh, well, that's it. Like, there's nothing else. Like, everything in here that we can find is stuff that we already know about. So therefore, there's nothing more to look for. We don't need to spend our time searching the map for something else. We don't need to keep on messing around with that button in Bunker 11. So, you know, there was a button you could press that would clear the smoke, and there was a timer that kept on getting stuck at 2. Like, we thought that was going to be something else. After doing the data mining, nope, nothing there. So that was kind of how I got involved in all of it. And then there was a post from, I think, Modern Warzone, where they were saying something about like, oh, we're pretty sure like the dam's gonna burst in Verdansk. Like, we know that at some point this dam is gonna explode, the map's gonna be flooded. And they were talking about stuff in it. It was really weird. They were like, oh, there's descriptions of palm trees being knocked over and a church being knocked over. And I was like, so at this point, I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't posted any leaks, any spoilers, any data mines, anything like that. And I was reading these tweets and being like, that doesn't make sense because, I mean, A, in Warzone 1, there was no swimming. So I don't see how they were going to do water or anything like that. And also, there wasn't any churches and there wasn't any palm trees. And I was like, this is a very strange description. But it was being posted as if like this was just fact. And so I was like, I'm going to have a look at this myself. So this was the first time I did the data mining myself. Rather than just reading what other people had done, I was like, okay, I'll download these tools and stuff. It literally took me like 5 minutes to work out how to do it. And then I could open up all the files and I looked for it. And I started searching for all this stuff like dam and church and palm trees. And I found a bunch of the files that they were talking about. We found loads of that stuff. And it was like, oh, this isn't about Warzone. It was in the files for Warzone for sure. But then I was like, this sounds familiar to me. And I realized it was from a mission, a campaign mission in Call of Duty Ghosts. There's a campaign mission where you're going through a town, a dam explodes at the end of the town, the sort of end of a valley, and then it floods and a church is destroyed, the palm trees are knocked over. It's exactly what's talked about in those files. And I was like, oh, well, it's just basically there's a load of leftover garbage in the files for whatever reason, probably attached to the engine in some way, that has made it into Warzone. But it's like, it was from Call of Duty Ghosts. And so I posted all of that stuff and got a load of, like, that was probably the first time I posted tweets and stuff that got a lot of attention. I was like, and, you know, I made a video about it being like, this is wrong. Like, the dam isn't going to blow up, or at least there's nothing in the files to suggest it is going to blow up. And so I could post that, started getting a bit of attention. And then I was like, obviously, oh, well, like, I want to make a popular content creator channel. What else can I find in here? This was the beginning of the pandemic. I was excited about it. You know, this was like March 2020, April 2020. And I was like, oh, well, like, I've got a lot of time on my hands. I want to make a channel popular. I'm getting attention from doing this. What else can I find in the files that other people have misunderstood or other people have missed? And then I started looking, and there was like, I found a lot of stuff about the porn takes porn stuff that we didn't know was porn takes porn at that point. We knew that, like, we found all of those ciphers and stuff like that, and we were just like, oh, well, this must be something that was unused, like something that they'd put in, but they never ended up using them. And people spent a while trying to work out how to solve the ciphers, but you couldn't. You literally couldn't at that point because you needed the videos from Porn Takes Porn to put the numbers in to solve them. And we didn't have any of that side of it, so none of that could be solved at all. I've seen some people spreading lies on the internet saying like, oh, Geeky Pastimes had data mined everything and had solved it all, so when he did Porn Takes Porn, he was only pretending to try and solve it. And it's like, if you understood the puzzles in Porn Takes Porn, you'd know that was literally impossible. Like, we didn't have, I'd say we didn't even have 50% of the puzzle. We didn't have the main bit you needed to decode anything. But we had seen the cipher pages. That at least was true. And other people had found it months before I did. And then we started finding the intel. So someone, not me, but someone found out a way. You know when there was like the intel every 2 weeks you could go look for? Someone found a way of getting the coordinates for every piece of intel. And so they managed to make a map. So when new pieces of intel came out, they could literally be like, this one will be here, this one will be here, this one will be here, this one will be here. So you could make guides, and I did. I made a few guides on them, being like, as soon as the intel went up, I could quickly go find them all in game to get video of finding them all. And we could find them all super fast. And there were problems with it, like it wasn't perfect. Some intel wasn't where you thought it would be. Some of it was a bit trickier to interact with for whatever reason. There was a lot of bugs. But like that was definitely using data mine stuff for the first few at least. And then it was like, I think the last time I did it was the beginning of season 5 for Modern Warfare 2019. So beginning of season 5 Modern Warfare 2019, just before it started, I found a load of stuff in there where I thought I'd found the date for when season 5 would start, because there was like a Unix time code that seemed to line up with when it should launch. It was wrong. And then I also found the subtitles, or like the descriptions of the animations for what was going to happen in the season 5 reveal trailer. And that ended up being right. It was about, the stadium roof blowing up. And that was true. So I found that and I tweeted it and I was like, hey, look, we've got like the season 5, like I know what's going to happen in the cutscene. And I posted about it. And again, got a bunch of attention, got a bunch of retweets, and it felt good, being like, oh, PC Gamer are talking about my tweets and videos, and like Modern Warzone's talking about it, Charlie Intel's talking about it, and I was like, oh, this is exciting. There's all of these people that I've heard of talking about my stuff. And then after that, I didn't really do anything after that. I'd like looked up what the one thing that I always found a bit curious, I'm still interested in, is there were loads of references in the files to something called multi-team musical chairs. And I never knew what that was. I never found out what that was. But there was a lot of files connected to there being a musical chairs mode in Warzone, which is very strange. Anyway, so long story short, then like all of that happened. Then I didn't really do anything after that. I was like preoccupied with doing other stuff. And then Porn Takes Porn happened kind of roughly about the same time, I guess. It started up. And Porn Takes Porn, I was really excited about. I really loved it. I loved the format of it. I loved the structure of it. And then they did a section of it, like a week of it, that I think was meant to be super exciting, was meant to be like really, really cool. And it was basically like every day in a week, there was a new video posted to Porn Takes Porn. In it, there was some of the codes that we were using for the ciphers. So these were numbers flashing up on a screen that we had to record, and that was awesome. We were doing all of that. But then there was also a code that was shown on a video recorder while this was all happening. And the code on the video recorder would be the code we needed to get into one of the bunkers. So every day we were going to get into a new bunker, or, the weird little sheds. And inside the sheds was the ciphers that we'd found ages before. And before this had happened, some people had already glitched into all of these places. So they'd managed to push themselves in using an ATV, and they'd glitched into all these places, and they'd made videos of, oh, hey, look, this is what's in Bunker 3, this is what's in Bunker 10, this is what's in whatever. And so all of these bunkers had already been explored, people had shown what was in them, people had found the big missile in Bunker 10, people had found all of that stuff, posted it all, talked about it all. And then when this week happened, and we realized on the first day, we were like, oh, cool, we got a code to get into Bunker 1. It's like, oh, but we've already seen in Bunker 1. But like now we can go in it in game, like legit, and get a bit of loot and stuff, I guess. That's kind of cool. And then the next day happened. It was like, oh, now we're getting into this room, which people have already seen into. And we were like, oh, this is what's going to happen every day now. We're going to get pieces of cipher that we already have, and we're going to get to go inside bunkers that we've already seen what's inside them. And I was like, this is rubbish. Like, this has spoiled this entire week. This should have been a super exciting week. Imagine if right now, in Ashika Island, every day for a week, they were revealing new locations and we could access new buildings and stuff like that, and there was hidden stuff in them. That would be so cool. But because we knew everything that they were showing us and we could predict exactly what was going to happen every day, interest in Porn Takes Porn from like the Easter egg community and stuff just completely plummeted. Everyone was like, oh, this is boring. We're just getting stuff that we know all the time. Like, nothing's new. It was like the excitement just dropped off insanely. And I still hear people saying, oh, Porn Takes Porn was really boring. We didn't get anything new, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, we should have if it wasn't for the data mines and the glitches and the leaks. And so as soon as that happened, I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I'm not going to do any more data mining. I'm not going to do any more sharing leaks or reading spoilers. Because Porn Takes Porn should have been this amazing thing where they were doing something that a game, as far as I know, had never done before. And instead, it ended up being this thing that a lot of people saw as boring because of the leaks, because of the spoilers and stuff like that. And then when the ciphers came out, at least they'd done something interesting where we had to still solve the ciphers on a day. And, my community did that and it was awesome. But we were always tainted by the fact people were like, oh, well, you just data mined it all, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, while there's some element of truth in that we had seen the ciphers before, if you followed it, you knew that, like, that didn't really matter, actually. Like, that, by the time that the day that the puzzles all needed to be solved, that wasn't something that actually helped. I mean, other than being aware of what each page looked like, I guess. But yeah, so that was the moment where I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I don't want to be a part of this. And then since then, it's everything that's happened has reinforced my view, where it's like every new Call of Duty game, we know what it is before it happens. Every season, we know what's coming in the seasons before they get posted, before they get talked about. Whenever there's like a new operator or a new weapon or something like that, like I've already seen people, as someone that tries to avoid leaks and tries to avoid spoilers, I already feel like I have a decent idea of what's coming in terms of like what new weapons are coming and stuff like that. Because bloody Twitter going the For You page, even though I don't follow Charlie Intel anymore, gets posted up there and then you see all of that stuff. And I find that like really annoying. And I've spoken to a lot of developers about this, like Call of Duty developers and for other games. And I've seen a lot of stuff people have talked about on Twitter and stuff like that. And it's like developers are never happy about this. Like developers have never enjoyed this side. Well, I'm not going to say never. There might be some developers that have liked it. But out of the ones I've spoken to and the ones I've seen talking about it, they're always gutted about it because they always have a plan. You know, they're working on something literally for years a lot of the time. They're working on something. And then rather than them getting to reveal it in the way they want to, you know, with a cool trailer or with like a cool little ARG or whatever it is, like their announcement, instead all the thunder gets stolen by someone tweeting, oh, hey, this is going to happen in May or whatever. And then the developer's just like, oh, yeah, that is happening in May. And then they reveal it and no one cares because everyone already knew about it. And it's like, that must be so gutting for them. And, you know, they've said it is. I've heard people describing it as like heartbreaking and devastating and stuff. Because it's like, to us, it might just be, oh, it's just a thing in a video game. But to them, it's something they've been working on for a long while. And like I was saying before, the things that you remember about E3 are those like amazing trailers, those really cool moments where something happened that was a complete surprise. That's super cool. Like imagine, you know, the Godzilla and Kong stuff in Cold Era, if we hadn't known anything about that coming, that would have been awesome. Like I was still kind of impressed when we saw the trailers and we're like, oh, they're actually on the map walking about. That's super cool. But it's like, I'd still known a lot of what was going to happen, which kind of sucks. Like kind of ruined it a lot. But yeah, so like I said, I understand why people post it. I understand why people post this stuff because it gets some attention, it gets some clicks, it gets some views and stuff like that. It's a very easy type of content to do because, you know, leaks are probably the easiest type of content to do. They're the lowest effort because essentially you're not creating anything. All you're doing is breaking a secret. You know, you're just saying something that somebody else was like, hey, please don't tell anyone about this. And then you're like, I'm going to tell everyone about this. And that's the extent of the work that most people do when they're doing it. And it gets lots of shares, it gets lots of views because it's a new piece of information and people like knowing stuff that other people don't. And I think that's a massive part of it. And I've been guilty of this in the past as well, of like, it is fun to know something that other people don't. And, you know, this is the thing that I think I constantly come up against in chat. And I think I'm kind of getting well known for being kind of angry with chat about this. But lots of people come into my chat in various streams, various comments and stuff like that, and they feel a need to tell me something about something that's going to happen in the game or something that's going to happen in Call of Duty or something's going to be released. They'll be like, did you hear about blah, 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 blah. Or they'll be like, I'll be playing a game and they'll be like, oh, you'll love this next bit where blah, blah, blah. Or like, have you seen this yet where blah, blah, blah. And then they just tell you a thing that would have been a fun surprise and might have been a fun surprise for them. But now they just want to show off that they know it and you don't. And like they think they're doing you a favor. Like again, I don't think a lot of this is malicious. I think these people are excited about something they know. They want to share it. And there's also this little element of like, hey, I get to show how knowledgeable I am by showing you something else. And it's like, they don't think about the fact that it's kind of spoiling it for the other person. They don't think about the fact that it's kind of ruining the other person's experience. And it's the thing that's really, really horrible for me about spoilers and about leaks is that it's not something you can ever take back. Like when I've seen little clips of a ride that I'm going to go on at some point, I can't ever have that experience now of going on that ride and being surprised by that. Like that's just literally gone forever. With a movie, when someone spoils something in a film for you, you're never going to have that experience with that film of enjoying the surprise, of enjoying the reveal. And, you know, same with video games, same with books, same with anything. There's always going to be like, it's always going to be, now you know it forever. It's not like, you know, when you have a cheater in a game of Warzone and it ruins that game for you. And it's like, that sucks. But then you can go into the next game and it's kind of reset. You know, you might enjoy the next game. With a spoiler, it's just gone forever. They have destroyed that thing for you. Bloody, I should stop talking about them so much, but bloody Doug from Modern Warzone, the thing that made me sort of suddenly have a lot of animosity towards him, which I held on to for like a year, was the night Last of Us 2 came out. Last of Us Part 2 came out, a game I was super excited to play. Literally, I would say about 20 minutes after that game launched, he posted a fairly significant spoiler about the beginning of the game in there. And it was like, it was something that was meant to be a surprise, and he just spoiled it on Twitter. This is like a Call of Duty news account. He posted it on Modern Warzone, a Call of Duty news account, just going out and spoiling a game that had come out like 20 minutes earlier. And it's like, that's horrific. Like, that has now spoiled that surprise for everyone who's played the game. And this is, you know, an account with like hundreds of thousands of followers or whatever. Like, that's horrific. And I think, you know, I overreact to these things. Like, I get overly sensitive about them, and I understand that. And I understand, like, I've seen loads of people being like that, especially with Call of Duty things, where like when we've been looking for Easter eggs and someone's come into a chat, you know, this happened with the Ashiko Island Easter eggs. People come into the chat and are saying like, oh, so you do this, this, and this, then this happens while I'm looking for it with my friends. And it's like, oh, okay. So now we just sort of go through the steps you said and see the thing that you've already told us happens. Like, you've killed all of the excitement for it immediately. Like, you've ruined the fun of that moment. And I've flown off the handle a little bit. I've got super dramatic about it. But it's because I really don't want people to do that. I don't want people to think that's okay. And then people always get like very defensive and are like, I was just trying to help. You were looking for something and I told you how to do it. Like, I'm just helping you. And it's like, you're bloody not. Like, I didn't ask you to tell me what happened. I didn't ask you to like spoil it in front of chat or anything like that. I find that very, very rude. And it's happened like time and time again, because obviously there's lots of different people. People don't think about it in the same way that I do necessarily. People don't care about it in the same way I do necessarily. And it's like a losing battle. And I've talked about this before. Like, me and Maida, who used to model a lot for the channel, we've had a lot of conversations about this, where sometimes I've been like, should I just give up? Should I just give up caring about spoilers and leaks and stuff like that? Because it's like, the nature of this community is that people thrive on leaks, especially when communication is poor from the developers. There's a huge amount of focus on leaks and stuff like that. Like, and it makes me get very combative with my viewers. Like, maybe I should just forget about it. And it's because, you know, it's a video game in the end. Like, no one cares that much what happens. But it's like, I don't know. I still think I can't avoid the fact that in my heart, I still care about it. I still care about wanting the experience to be as good as it possibly can. And I don't know. We'll talk about some of this. We'll talk about some of the what people have been saying in chat about that. But talking about wanting experiences to be good as possible, I'm going to tell you a little story now. This is not related to leaks, really. No, it's not at all. So yesterday was my birthday, as I've already said. I like talking about my birthday. And I went to the cinema to go see Dungeons and Dragons, new film. People said it was really good. Very excited about it. And so I went to cinema. I went to Odeon. I don't mind telling you which cinema it was. I went to Odeon because they normally have better screens, better sound, stuff like that. My sister-in-law had given me a voucher for Odeon, so I was like, okay, this is cool. I won't have to pay for it. And the voucher was like 30 quid. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, me and my wife probably be able to go see 2 films for that, I figured. Like 30 quid, that seems like a lot. So I was excited about it. And then we went to the cinema, and first thing was a bit worried. Was you couldn't book it on the app or anything like that. You had to go up to the counter to use the voucher. So I went up to the counter and was like, oh, can I have 2 tickets for Dungeons and Dragons at half-free? And they're like, okay, sure, that's 28 quid. I was like, what? It was £14 each to go see a film. Not in IMAX or anything like that. Just bog standard, normal screening in the middle of the day on a Sunday, admittedly, so I guess maybe a bit busier. But £14 each. On Monday, I'd paid £15 to go see John Wick 4 in the IMAX screen at the same cinema, and now they were telling me it was £1 less to go watch Dungeons and Dragons, not in IMAX, just in a screen. But I was like, oh, fine, I've got the voucher, screw it, I'll pay for it. So we go in. So we went into the screen. The screen was tiny. Like, it was one of those, you know, when you go to the cinema, a big multiplex, and there's like one screen that's rubbish. It was obviously the rubbish screen. It was absolutely tiny. And when we'd looked at choosing the seats, we'd seen that like it was nearly full. And we were getting into the cinema. We got into the cinema like at the time that the film was meant to start. So it was like 3:30 yesterday. And so we'd got there at 3:30. We walked to the screen because I don't want to sit there for ages and then have to sit for all the adverts and stuff. I know there's half an hour of adverts before the film starts. So we got there at 3:30, and the screen was like empty basically. There was probably like 10 people in there. And as we walked to try and find our seats, there was like rips in all of the upholstery, like all of the chairs were all like torn up, there were holes everywhere. And it was like, oh, this is why it looked full, was because they just weren't selling a lot of the seats because they're so badly damaged. So they were just selling the like handful of seats that were not entirely damaged, even though the seats, like the seats that we had, still had holes in them. And like we were still sitting on seats that were damaged, but like they weren't as damaged as some of the others. But anyway, I was like, oh, okay, we sat down. And we sat down and we were like kind of like off to one side towards the back, but not too far. And while we were watching the trailers and the adverts, I was sitting there thinking like, this is kind of rubbish. Like the sound was quite bad and I could hear the background track way louder than the dialogue track. So I was watching a lot of the same trailers that I'd seen on Monday. So the trailers for, Fast X and Indiana Jones and stuff like that. And it was like, I could barely hear what the characters were saying, but I could hear the music super, super loud. And I was like, oh, maybe it's just the trailers and stuff. Maybe it'll get sorted. Maybe it'll be fine. And then the actual movie started, after half an hour of trailers. So we'd been sitting in there for half an hour with this terrible audio. And it was like the picture was dark and slightly fuzzy, slightly out of focus. The background audio was really loud, and the like dialogue audio, not only was it way too quiet, but it was like kind of a little bit distorted, like a little bit fuzzy, like one of the speakers wasn't quite working properly. And I was like, oh my God, like this is quite a bad experience. So I sat through it like for like 5 minutes, and like I leant over to my wife and was like whispering to her, like, does this look blurry to you? And I know I'm more sensitive about stuff like that than a lot of people. Like I care about that stuff more than a lot of other people do. But she was like, like kind of. And I was like, oh, maybe it's just me. And I sort of sat back and I was looking. I was like, no, this doesn't look right. Like things that were very clearly meant to be in focus were still a bit blurry. And it was a small screen. It's not like, oh, it's a big screen, so that's why it wasn't super sharp. It was like, this is a small screen and it still wasn't sharp at all. And it was because it was quite dark, you couldn't really see a lot of stuff. And I couldn't hear what was going on. I couldn't hear what people were saying very well whenever there was something going on in the background. I was just like, this is rubbish. So after about 5-10 minutes, I was just like, yeah. Like my wife was like, do you want to go? And I was like, yeah. So we just got our stuff, went out of the screen, went to like the front of house. And I was like, yeah, like I'm sorry to cause a fuss, but like that was really bad. Like the screen is really bad. It's dark. It's blurry. The audio is really bad. The seats are all torn up. Like, can I just get a refund and like we'll go? And the first people that the teenagers who were behind the tills were like, one of them suddenly started talking and was sort of like, well, we can't give you a refund because the seats are damaged because they're all going to get fixed in the summer. And I was like, but I'm not here in the summer. I'm here now. Like, I'm here when the seats aren't fixed. Like, I'm not paying 14 quid each for a ticket when, like, the seats we're sitting on have holes in them. Like, let alone, like, all of the screen problems and everything like that. She was like, well, I can't do a refund anyway and get a manager. And then the manager came over, and the manager was fine. She did do a bit of the beginning of being like, well, just let me go check in the screen to see whether it is okay. And it's like, no, I'm telling you, I'm not happy with it. And I've already missed a bunch of the film by coming out here and talking to you. I don't want to, like, you to say, oh no, it's actually fine, and then us to have to go back in and watch the rest of the film after missing like quarter of an hour of it. So she was like, oh, okay, and then she gave me a refund and we're going, and like, I might go back, I might go watch it in IMAX or something. I might go watch it later today. I don't know. I'll see how I feel. But it was just sort of like such a crap experience. And that, like, to be paying £14 for that is insane. I tweeted about it yesterday. It's like, I remember when internet piracy was like a massive thing for movies before Netflix, Amazon Prime and stuff like that. And there was lots of adverts being like, why would you watch it on like a horrible, like copied VHS? Like, the quality's going to be bad. The tracking's going to be bad. You can come watch it in the cinema, how it's meant to be seen. And it's like, now it's the exact opposite. If I could watch that film, if I could pay for it to watch it digitally, I could pay, what is it on YouTube? Like 16 quid for a new film. I could pay 16 quid, which is only £2 more than what I'd pay for one ticket, but me and my wife could both enjoy it, and I could watch it on my TV. It would be super crisp. It'd be in high, 4K, HDR. I'd have all my sound set up and everything like that. My sound setup isn't that good, but it's better than what that cinema was. And it's like, I could have that at home, or I can pay twice as much money to go to the cinema and have a terrible experience watching it, with also having to deal with other people eating and talking and stuff in the screen, and like the lights coming on and people sitting there on their phones. There was a guy in front of me as well. That was the other annoying thing. A guy with his smartwatch on, and his smartwatch kept going to this bright white screen every now and then. And it's like, so you know, in the cinema, they do that thing where they slowly lower the lights so your eyes get used to the darkness, because then it makes the screen like a little bit more vibrant. But that gets ruined if you look at a bright screen, like a mobile phone or a bloody smartwatch. So it's like his like OLED screen on his smartwatch is like blinding me, and it's like, oh, this probably isn't helping with how dark the screen looks. But yeah, super annoying, super irritating. There's not really a point to that story. I just wanted you to tell you how bloody annoyed I was. And hopefully you can relate to it and I don't seem like I'm, absolutely horrible. Let's talk about the last couple of things I want to talk about in today's podcast before we'll get onto it. It was the copyright thing. So this was more of just an interesting thing that I saw someone tweeting about the other day, and I thought this would be a fun thing to chat about, because I don't really know what other people's opinions are. But I sometimes watch other people's streams, surprisingly rarely, but I do sometimes sit down and watch someone else's stream, often when I'm editing. And the people who I tend to watch are on Twitch a lot of the time, just because a lot of the time when I finish streaming, there's no one else on YouTube. Broken and Lackey often finish at similar times to what I do. And so I end up watching people like Jaff or like Mimosa sometimes, people like that. And one thing I always notice about their streams is that they're playing music. They're playing like actual music. And I know Twitch has always had this weird thing where some people just play music and get away with it. And I'm always like, I'm too scared. I'm too scared to break the rules or anything like that. But they're just playing music that's like clearly breaking copyright, because you're, using this music for your own entertainment show. You're not paying any license fee or anything like that. So that's definitely something you're not allowed to do, but they can kind of get away with it. And I've always been like, I wish I could do that. Like, I wish I could just have music on the back of the streams. I'd love to have music in the back of this podcast. And I've thought about, I could get some music where I could get royalty-free music, stream-safe music, the MCA-free music. I could pay for a license for a lot of music. But I'd kind of prefer to have music that I know rather than that kind of generic music. Like, I can easily put on some generic music in the background. And I might do that in future. I don't know. I'd be interested to know. People in chat, let me know. Would you prefer to have some generic music in the background? Elevator music or something. Some lo-fi music. We might do that in future. But anyway, I don't normally do it because I think people, when they're listening to, if anyone actually listens to this as a podcast, you might be like me and actually put your own music on, and then it would be super annoying. Anyway, I was trying to think, like, how could they ever fix this problem of how do you deal with copyright and streaming and all of that sort of stuff? Like, how do you make it so it's possible? Because right now, surely no one's happy with the situation. Surely no one's happy with the fact that essentially streamers and content creators can't use popular music on their streams and channels. Because it's not like the record makers, the record license holders, whoever, are benefiting from this, because their music is not getting heard as much, their music is not getting paid for, they're not getting any money out of this. And content creators and streamers are suffering because they can't use music they like, they can't share the music they like with people, they can't like use it at the same time. You can use, like, again, generic music, but it's not the same as, if I could sit here and have some, like, music that I grew up with and be like, hey, have you heard this song? It's really cool. Almost like a radio show type thing. That'd be cool. So, like, everyone should be unhappy with the current situation. And I understand the problem of, like, people who own the record licenses would like to, the rights to the records, would like to get paid when they're used in a performance. Perfectly fine. I think that completely makes sense. And streamers and content creators don't want to pay for a, like, radio license, which I imagine you could do. I imagine I could get a license, similar kind of license to what local radio stations have. And then, I don't know whether you do that individually with the different labels or how that works, but you could get a license and then you could pay for it to be able to play the music. But that's obviously worth it for a radio station that their main thing is playing music. That's how to get people in. Not really worth it for a streamer or a content creator who has a much smaller audience, and it would just be background music. It's not the main point of the stream. So it's like there needs to be something in between, like license to use music as background music. I think that would be much better. And it's like, how do you do that? I've always said, like, to me, the perfect solution would be to have Spotify having like a streamer package, Spotify or Amazon Music or Apple Music or whoever. to have a separate type of license that you can pay. Maybe it'd be like £50 a month instead of £10 a month. And it's like, now you can use music in your streams with the sort of, you know, terms and conditions that it can't be the main point of your stream. You can't like run a stream that's like, hey, listen to like my rock radio and then have that as your thing. It has to be background music when you're doing something else or talking about something else. Like that would be the idea. I think that could work, but you know, I'm not involved in the record industry. I don't know how feasible that would be. The fact that no one's done it yet makes me kind of think that it can't work, but we'll see. I know YouTube have done it with like shorts and things like that. They've sort of said, hey, there's some music you can do. And now YouTube have started doing a thing where it's like you can use some of their music in your content and you pay individually for the tracks. And it's like some tracks are things where you just pay for. You just say, hey, I'm going to pay £50 and now I can use this song in this video. Or some of them are like, hey, you can use this song in the video and you'll get like 2%. They'll get 2% of the revenue of the video for you because their music is in it. Which like makes kind of sense for a short form video. It doesn't make a lot of sense for a stream. You know, if you're going to stream for 6 hours and you're going to give every song you play 2%, you're going to very quickly end up giving all of your money away to the people who are providing the background music for it. So it's like, it's very difficult. I think, like, to me, I was thinking the other day, what would be a nice solution and something that would actually solve the other problem I was talking about, that, you know, background music in a podcast can be annoying if you want to listen to your own music, but it could be fine for, but some people would really like it and it might make the podcast a bit better, is it'd be very cool if like YouTube or Twitch or Kick or whoever had a system where there was like a background music toggle on a stream. And I've got no idea how possible this is, but imagine if I know I can upload my stream with different audio tracks. Because Twitch already does this. Twitch already does a thing where you can stream and you have your music audio set on a specific track in the way you're encoding it. And then Twitch knows to play that on the live stream, but not to play it on a VODs. It deletes it for the VODs because there's different rules about recorded content compared to streaming content, apparently. I don't know. I don't understand it all. But imagine if you could do that where like you're listening to a stream and it's like you can put a switch on and now you've got all the background music from the stream. You can tick the checkbox and you get the background music and you turn the checkbox off and then you've got it just without the background music. That would be pretty cool, I think. And if it was like that, so it was like an optional thing, an opt-in, opt-out, they could even do it so like, okay, markets where you can't play this music, you know, it's against DMCA or whatever, then you can have it so it's automatically disabled in those markets. They can still access your content, they just won't have the background music, and then markets where it does work, do it. Or even do it where like, how about I play music on Spotify with my stream, and if you've got a Spotify license, you can listen to that music. And if you don't have a Spotify license, you can't listen to music. Like the watch-along thing that they did on Twitch with Amazon, where it's like, if you've all got Amazon Prime, you can all watch a movie together, but you can't see the stream if you don't have Amazon Prime. They could do something like that with music, maybe, in Spotify. I feel like that would be quite cool, where it'd be like, I'd pay for that, you know, I'd have that on my stream, where it's like, hey, there is background music, but you need to have a Spotify license if you want to listen to it. I'd be absolutely fine with that. I think that would be pretty cool. Anyway, I mean, let me know what you thought. That was just me pondering about it. I don't really know. The last thing I want to talk about very quickly was about different games that I'm going to be playing. Now, there is only one game coming out this week, where it's coming out on the 8th, I think, which I'm going to be playing. I'm just trying to find the code for it so I can tell you about it, because I can't actually remember what it's called. There we go. April 6th, this game comes out on. Now, I can't do too much about it, but I can start... It's coming out on Thursday, April 6th, but I can start streaming it tomorrow from 1 p.m. So from 1 p.m. BST, I can start streaming it. And it's called Raven's Watch, which I'm quite excited about. So, for anyone who doesn't know, we'll have a quick look at it if anyone hasn't seen it, because I don't know too much about this, and I don't know if it's something we should be super excited about. So this is... I'll put on the screen IGN's trailer for it just once we've got past an advert. I should have all this stuff ready to go, really. It would make much more sense. But let's show you Raven's Watch. Is this sort of thing that you'd like to see me play? Let me know, because I can stream this from tomorrow.
Once upon a time, the world of dreams,
put my headphones on so I can actually hear it with you.
was invaded by nightmares. The Ravens Watch, ravens that protect Reverie, called upon fallen heroes of fairy tales and legends to join forces to defend the world. From the developers of the acclaimed Curse of the
Dead Gods, very good.
This upcoming action roguelike is set in a dark fantasy.
So this isn't like a Diablo
and
type
playable
game, it's
solo
more like a
or in
Hades type
online
thing, I
co-op
think.
Up to 4 players. You play as twisted versions
But multiplayer.
of old folk fairy tale heroes. Little Red Riding Hood, the Pied Piper, the Snow Queen. Choose from 6 popular characters, each with
I think
their
this
own
looks kinda
play
cool.
styles. Master their abilities and fight back against the evil corrupting the world. More heroes will be added during the early access. Explore vast and ever-changing chapters with their own cast of enemies and quests. Collect dream shards to buy power-ups and magical objects from the Sandman, and fight hordes of enemies to level up. Each hero has multiple abilities at their disposal. First is the trait, a hero's core mechanic.
It's going to go on for ages now. We don't need to listen to the whole thing.
For instance,
but that game looks kind of interesting, I think. So I have been sent a code for it. I can play it from, like I said, 1 p.m. tomorrow. So I might do a stream where we play a little bit of that. But let me know what you think. Like, is that the sort of thing people would like to see? It's quite different out compared to the other games that I've played. But roguelikes can be fun. And it's co-op, so I might be able to try and rope someone else into playing it with me. I've got a couple of spare codes, so if I can find a couple of people who want to play it with me, we might even be able to do some co-op as well. Right, in this last, 10 minutes or so of the stream, we're just going to have a look through some of the chat messages and what people were saying about it. I will go back up to the beginning, but if anyone has anything in chat that they would like me to talk about, any questions, anything they'd like me to answer, any corrections to things I've said, then please let me know and we'll talk about them. So, Alphas was saying, going back to the game leak topic. I don't think game leaks are a good thing since almost all early footage looks awful. However, I do think game companies should be more transparent with production. I'm not sure. I do think game leaks can often be very damaging. Some of you might know there's a guy called Tom Henderson who does a website called Insider Gaming, I think it is. And his whole shtick is that he gets people to break NDAs for him. So he gets in contact with people who have signed an NDA for something, whether they're working on a game or they're in a test or something, and he gets them to break their NDA, and then he posts all of the information. And so much of it is just kind of making games look bad by being like, hey, look, this is what this game looks like that's not coming out for a couple of years. Doesn't it look terrible? Whoa, it's super toxic. And he's an awful writer. People have sent me a couple of his articles before, and it's he's a terrible writer, but he's got a big following because he gets people to break NDAs. So, he does find out it's accurate information. There's nothing for no problem with that. He's finding out real things, but it's literally just again, going back to the whole problem of, do you want to find out about a game from a badly written article or tweet where it's kind of just being super toxic about it, or do you want to actually see a cool reveal trailer when it's ready, or a cool beta reveal when it's ready? The second part of what Affers was saying about being more transparent with production. I do like surprises, and I kind of like the idea of game companies not announcing their games until closer to release. Apex Legends is going to be the best example of that for a long while, I think, where we didn't know Apex Legends existed until the day it came out. And that was awesome, I think. Just being there's all this hype. There was some rumors and stuff that EA were going to announce something, and it was Respawn. So people were is it a Titanfall thing? What's happening? And then they did that stream where it's all different locations. We could kind of see the art style. And then they did a trailer, and they were hey, or a presentation, being this is a battle royale. It's got, hero abilities. This is the map. It's got these cool movement things. And you can download it right now and play it. And it's that blew my mind. That was super exciting. Absolutely loved it. Had an awesome few weeks playing that. And it's I kind of prefer games to be a bit more like that. I know that there's a feeling in the wider gaming community that it's good for games to be shown off earlier so feedback can be given, and I really disagree with that. I know I'm in the minority on this, but I really don't think the vast majority of feedback is useful or a good thing. I don't think gaming communities give good feedback. I don't think gaming communities are a useful tool for feedback. I think most game companies, especially big game companies, talking about EA, Activision, Ubisoft, etc., I think they know how to get feedback when they want it. and when they can use it. And so, they will do playtests. They do a lot of playtests. I am on a list where I constantly get emails about EA playtests, in person and remote things. And Ubisoft do loads of them. Activision, I'm sure, do lots of them. And they'll get the feedback then. And bear in mind, when we talk about there's 14 studios working on Call of Duty, most of those people are people who play Call of Duty. Like, they work on the games and they know them. And it's like the idea that people are like, oh, well, like, how did they not know the UI was bad? Like, they should have got the community to have a look at it. And it's like, I bet they did know the UI was bad, but I bet it was something where it's like, if you hire a separate company to make the UI, or you hire a team to do the UI, and then you don't find out, like, it's not done until maybe it's missed a couple of deadlines and it's too late. And then when it is done, it's kind of crap, but it's like, but we need to ship a game and everything needs to fit together. We don't have time to redo it. We don't have the resources to redo it. We need to go with what they've made. Stuff like that happens. Anyone who's worked on any project in adult life will know that if you're working with a team, stuff doesn't happen. Like, someone will mess up, someone will do a bad job, someone will do something that doesn't quite mesh with what everyone else is doing, and it goes badly. And it's just kind of, I don't believe for a second that there's people at Infinity Ward or Raven or Treyarch or whoever who don't know about the problems that Call of Duty has right now. They understand them, they know what they are. It's much more a problem of execution. It's always like the cliched thing of where you see kids on forums and stuff like that talking about how they're going to be amazing game developers because they've got loads of great ideas, and all they need is like a programmer who can do it for them, or an artist who can make it for them. But they're going to be the main person, they're going to be the ideas person. And it's like, your ideas are worthless. Like, everyone's got brilliant ideas. Everyone's got ideas about how you can make the perfect game. Everyone's got ideas about how you can improve games. That's very, very easy, very low effort. You need very small amount of like experience or knowledge to have an idea. The execution is the really, really difficult part. And when you've got a game like Call of Duty that's insanely complex and bigger than like any game that people have done before, in this kind of space, and it's like something that's using an engine that none of us will understand unless you've worked directly on it in the last year or two, you're probably not going to have a good understanding of it. It's impossible to know the challenges that they're facing. And, they don't talk about it publicly, but maybe there's reasons for that. Like, I know I've tried to get them to do interviews and stuff like that in the past, and I've always been told the problem is, and I've been told this, by quite senior people at Call of Duty in the various development studios, that the problem is that there's loads of stuff they legally can't talk about. There's loads of stuff to do with the technology they use. There's loads of stuff that they do to do with, like, proprietary stuff that they've created, they've invented, that they can't talk about because it's a trade secret. It's a company secret. They're legally not allowed to talk about it. So it's kind of, yes, I understand, like, the desire from us to have more transparency and the desire for us to hear more about the games. But I genuinely, 100% believe that most of the time they know any of the feedback that we would possibly give them. The only time I would say feedback is really useful to them, and feedback is useful from the community, is balance. I think that there's a element of, there's stuff, particularly with things like Gunsmith, where there's so many different combinations and things like that, where in-house they don't have enough people, they don't have enough time to test out all of the different combinations and to see how the game will evolve. And so things like the way maps are laid out and the way guns work and stuff like that, I can understand the idea that you want to give feedback on stuff like that, because it's just like, oh, you can give feedback that's kind of something that someone else might not have seen, that like, hey, this is kind of overpowered, or this is kind of broken. And you might be wrong. That's the other thing that I think a lot of people in the community don't ever consider, is that they could just be wrong. When we've had a lot of the balancing patches, I know lots of people are like, oh, they haven't balanced it quickly enough, like the game's being ruined by this, this, and this. And it's like, but it might just be more complicated than what you're seeing. So like, with, say, one gun being super powerful in Warzone, it might be that maybe that gun is super powerful in the hands of people who have super good aim and really, really good movement and good map awareness, and therefore it's affecting games in the higher skill-based matchmaking brackets so it's affecting like 10% of games. And it could be that for the other 90% of games, people are having a great time using that gun, and actually it's not overperforming, and it's not like, obviously people at Activision will have lots of statistics about like, hey, this gun, when people use it, their average kill death is like 1, and this gun, people, when they use it, their average kill death is 0.3 and stuff like that. People, they will have that kind of information that we just don't have access to, and they'll be making decisions based on that. And it might not always be the decisions that, creators want or communities want or whatever. It's like we were playing yesterday, and someone, I think Jack, was talking about the Seikin. He picked up a Seikin and was like, oh god, picking up one of these. And I was like, Marley 13's been saying that's like one of the meta guns, that's like one of the best guns. And it's like, but then I haven't seen it in my games at all. I haven't seen anybody using it. I haven't seen anyone, like, I haven't been killed by it or anything like that. And it's very strange, then you hear about things like, oh, the fire shotgun got nerfed into oblivion. But then I saw someone getting absolutely slaughtered by it the other day. It's like, maybe we don't have as much information. Maybe we can't make these decisions. And, I saw some tweets over the weekend where people were saying things like, oh, it's easy for them to change this. It's easy for them to fix this. It's easy for them to do this. And it's like, we don't know. Unless you literally work in a studio and you've been in some meeting where someone said, oh, it's easy for us to do this. And someone else has been like, well, yeah, but I don't want you to. Unless you've got proof of that happening, which I don't think happens very much, then maybe it isn't easy. Maybe it's not as simple as we think. I had a really eye-opening discussion with a engineer who worked on Call of Duty, who had worked on Warzone, and was talking about why things like, the Metro got taken away in Verdansk, and why, there's not many zombies in the Haunting of Verdansk event and stuff like that. Why all of those things are the way it is. And it was all to do with MTU size. And he was saying, so much of it comes down to MTU size, that there's only so much information you can fit in to a packet that's being sent across the network to your servers. And that's not something that Call of Duty have any control over. It's like an internet-wide standard, and they're constantly hitting against that limit. So they have to find sort of compromises that, if they improve this one thing, then something else has to be reduced. Something else has to be taken away. And it's like, that's nothing to do with Call of Duty and Call of Duty's like technology as such. It's to do with like just the facts of how the internet is, and the fact that a lot of the internet is using very, very old standards that haven't been changed, and Activision can't do anything about that. So it's like they're making compromises and they're making decisions based on pieces of information that the vast majority of people wouldn't understand or care about, and nearly everyone doesn't know, because a lot of them are like legally have to be kept secret based on their contracts and stuff like that. So I've always think like, yes, it would be nice for people like us to have a bit more transparency, but I don't think the feedback that we can give is very useful. I genuinely don't. And I think, I've been very vocal in that I think a lot of the big problems that Call of Duty have had over the last few years, and especially over the last year with Warzone, have been because Activision's been trying to act on community feedback. And I think it's just like, it's like a dog chasing its own tail. It's like, it's not going to work. It's not going to fix anything. And if anything, all it does is destroy the original vision that the game was built around by the people that actually know how to make the game. And instead, they're trying to chase things that people have been saying who have no idea of what they're talking about, or very little. I just think it's a very bad idea. Anyway, going on. Medago said, spoiler-free leaks are welcome, but I do try to stay away from those kind of videos. Some are nice enough to pin a spoiler warning, others not so much. Spoiler-free leaks, that's an interesting term. I'm not entirely sure what a spoiler-free leak would be, because to me, finding out anything is basically a spoiler. Like, say when a new ride, like going back to theme park example, when a new ride opens in a theme park, finding out anything about the experience of that ride is in some way spoiling the surprise. Same thing with a new video game. Anything someone posts about Call of Duty 2023, whatever it's going to be, anything you say about it, if you say what studio are making it, if you say what the title's going to be, if you say whether, is the focus going to be multiplayer or campaign or zombies or anything, any of that to me is a spoiler. Like, that's spoiling a piece of information that could be a fun surprise in a trailer. And it might be something that doesn't end up being interesting, but you don't know, and it's good not to know. There's a really good IT Crowd episode where, the main Roy wants to watch a film, and someone says, oh, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but there's an awesome twist at the end. And it's like, that's a spoiler. You have now spoiled a film because you're going to spend the entire film thinking about the fact of what's the twist going to be. And it's then when it happens, it's possibly just going to disappoint you because you build it up to be something better in your head. I don't know if you can have a spoiler-free leak. Affa said, looking at the film TV industry, much more open about what they're developing, but blurry on-set photos are rubbish. Are they that more open? I mean, they do have a much bigger trail. I suppose there's a lot of people involved, and it's kind of hard to keep some film secret. But, I would like it if films and TVs kept more stuff secret. I don't like how much is shown off in trailers and how much is ruined in trailers and stuff like that. IB said, Fozzie said, I've never cared about leaked spoilers. If a film game is good enough, even if I know what's going to happen, I'll still enjoy it. Like people who read books or comics before a movie comes out, etc. Yeah, and this idea of spoilers is actually quite a modern thing. Like some of you know, I used to teach English literature. And back in the days of like Shakespeare and stuff, generally when people went to the theatre, they already knew what was going to happen. Often it would be written outside the Globe Theatre. When they're describing a play, they would say what was going to happen. They would say the story, and the enjoyment would come from, seeing how it happens. The idea of like things having twists and surprises and reveals, like that's much more of a modern thing. Like that's a more recent thing in terms of fiction. So it's definitely, I can understand people who don't care about spoilers and leaks. I just always think it's like it's a personal preference, and it's like I personally enjoy surprises. I enjoy being surprised by media content. And if you're sharing a leak, if you're retweeting it or liking it or talking about it on social media, you're taking that choice away from anyone that can see your posts, which could be anyone because of the way social media works. So it's like, I don't think you should make that choice for someone else. I think that's rude. In exactly the same way as like, anything like this. If you say people, don't care about spoilers for books or in a film, if you're going to see a film and you've read the book already, you're not going to walk into the cinema and loudly talk about what happens in it to everyone else because you'd realize that was rude. You'd realize that some people want to go in there and be surprised by what's going to happen. They don't want you to be like loudly be like, oh, I can't wait till this happens. Like most people would get that's rude. Or if you walk out of a cinema and there's more people walking in to the next showing, you're not going to loudly talk about what just happened. That would be super rude. But video games, for some reason, people seem to think it's fine. I don't know why. It's weird. Managa said it's going to be more difficult for filmmakers now. They're not allowed to use misleading footage that's not in a movie. Did that court case actually get settled? I heard that was a thing that someone was saying that, oh, there was some actress, wasn't there, in a trailer, and then she wasn't actually in the finished cut of the film, and they were getting taken to court over it. I don't know if that ever got settled, because that was quite recent. Hey, Sega, greetings to Germany. Sorry, it's very late. Thanks for subscribing, by the way, Frevger and David Smith. Affa said, it's just sad if there's that much junk code. I mean, I don't think so. Something like Call of Duty, it's like, if there's like some strings and stuff left over, it's not like they're taking up a huge amount of space. And I think like Call of Duty is so insanely complicated that if at any point they decided to like start from scratch, they'd be throwing so much out that works well. Like the feel of I've always said this about Call of Duty, that when people talk about, oh, the trash Call of Duty games, I saw someone being like, the other day someone tweeted something, and it was about Vanguard saying, like, it's the worst game ever. And it's like, it's obviously not. All Call of Duty games have been very good games. At the very least, the worst Call of Duty games have been very good games. And it's like the feel of Call of Duty and the movement and the shooting have always been super, super good. And it's something, the fact that these games run at 60 frames a second on console and have done for a very long time, and they feel so good, and like you can pick them up and kind of get to grips with them very quickly. That's the kind of thing that I think is quite hard to replicate, and God knows people have tried. If it was easy to replicate how Call of Duty feels and performs, other first-person shooters would have done it, and they haven't. Like, no one's managed to do it. Even though Call of Duty is making insane amounts of money every single year, no one else has managed to do it. No one else has managed to imitate them, which, obviously it's in their best incentive to. It's like World of Warcraft. Loads of people tried to imitate World of Warcraft. Basically, no one managed it, other than maybe Final Fantasy XIV. Loads of people tried and failed and wasted loads of money. And it's kind of, I think it's a very difficult thing to do. And even for the Call of Duty developers, bear in mind, a lot of people who work on Call of Duty now weren't working on it, a decade ago. So they're not the ones who created this code. It's probably better if something's not getting in the way to not mess with it and sort of leave it how it is and just like keep on building on it. Especially as hard drives get better and stuff like that. I imagine text strings are not taking up very much space compared to like the audio files that are in the games. Pontex Spawn was great. Hoss said the disappointment wasn't from spoilers of Pontex Spawn. The disappointment was from where the game was going. Well, I don't know what you mean. What game? What you mean? Because it was Black Ops Cold War. I thought people were excited about it being Black Ops Cold War. I don't know. They wanted 22 quid each to see John Wick down here, House said. That's insane. That's such a huge amount of money. But just before COVID, cinemas here in Norwich went down to both Odeon and View, like the two big chains here, both put their tickets down to £5. So for a normal film, if you were going to go see a film and it wasn't like 3D or IMAX or something, it was £5 each. That was so good. I went to see so many films then. It was amazing. And then like after COVID, they started putting the prices back up, which sucked. And now it's up to like £14. Do you think cinemas have recovered from COVID or are still recovering? Yeah, on that thing, I think they're recovering in terms of they're back to kind of where they were pre-COVID, but cinemas were struggling a long time before COVID. You know, there's always been a thing about cinemas make all their money on food and drink because not as many people are going to the cinema because they've got better setups and more access to films at home, and they've got, you know, people don't have enough money to spend on them to keep paying them. And I think film distributors and stuff like that are still charging cinemas a lot to show their films. So it's like, at the moment, it's just not working out very well. Cinemas need to do like more events and better food, I think. Going on. Have to say, after the contest nerd said, oh, sorry, JR Matic said something which I've heard a lot of times, so many times from people, normally people who support, you know, Tom Henderson and leaks and stuff like that. This idea that he said, I think some games leak on purpose, especially with timing. There's probably been some isolated incidents where games have leaked some kind of information, where they've like put some sort of information out there and it's been presented as a leak when really it was them trying to get a bit of buzz going and stuff like that. That probably happens very occasionally. But as I said earlier, I know for a fact, I've spoken to lots of developers, lots of PR people, lots of people like that, who are genuinely upset, genuinely emotionally upset by leaks. Like, they get really upset that, like, their whole reveal plan just gets completely ruined and the narrative gets taken away from them. They can't present the game in the way they wanted to, the way they planned to. You know, sometimes for some games, like games that I know are coming out over the next year or two, I know there's entire plans about when the trailers are going to release, when like betas are going to release, when gameplay is going to release, when they're going to do in-person events and stuff like that. They have these massive plans, and then it can all get leaked early on, and then all of that work is ruined. All of those cool experiences for the fan community are completely ruined by some stupid leaks that happen early on. And this happened, you know, it happened with Half-Life 2, and, you know, Valve ended up sending that guy to prison. Like the Half-Life 2 thing, they definitely did do that on purpose. And like the GTA 6 leaks and stuff, it's like, I don't think many of them are on purpose, but I know there's lots of leakers. Loads of leakers say so much stuff to justify what they do. They're like, oh, well, companies do it on purpose. It's not, you know, we're not doing anything wrong. We're helping them. Or like, oh, all leaks do is create hype and buzz. It's really good for them. It's like, so why are the people who are making the stuff that you're leaking so angry with you and upset with you and trying to stop you? If it's good for them and they like it, why are they trying so hard to stop it? Like, that seems kind of dumb, you know? And it's like, people say like, oh, well, obviously the developers want it, otherwise stuff wouldn't leak. They should just get better at stopping leaks. And it's like, you've got, again, Call of Duty, 14 studios working on it. Think of how many people are working on it, not just programmers and coders, but also how many artists, how many voice actors are involved. Loads of leaks seem to come from voice actors lately, and a lot of the time the voice actors will literally be in a studio for like 3 days, but they'll have access to scripts and characters and stuff like that, and they'll know a little bit about the marketing plan if they then need to come back for events, stuff like that. Like, they're very, very loosely connected to the actual studios, like very loosely. And I know this for a fact happens with Call of Duty, where some of the voice actors and the motion capture people have very little to do with the studio and the developers and stuff like that, but they get very connected to like the Call of Duty name because it's their voice or their face or whatever. And they leak stuff, and it's like, they don't care about the studio, they don't care about the developers, they don't even know they don't know the developers or anything like that. But they do just leak stuff, and they do just talk to people a lot as if they're an authority on these games, which is very annoying for the developers. Yeah, I don't think, I know like the leakers are just sort of desperately trying to make themselves sound like they're doing something noble, rather than just, hey, we're making loads of content and making loads of easy content and money by just ruining things for other people who are actually making stuff. We're just going to ruin all their stuff. You know, I personally find it abhorrent that people hold people like Tom Henderson or even Jason Schreier or who else does it? Jeff Grubb. They hold people like that up on a pedestal, and then they give loads of hate towards the Call of Duty developers. And it's like, the Call of Duty developers are making something that, whatever you think about Call of Duty, you've been enjoying it for hundreds of hours, thousands of hours, some of you. And then these other people are literally just getting people to break someone else's trust in order to give you some information that you shouldn't have. That's probably slightly spoiling your enjoyment of the product in the first place. And it's like, those are the bad people. Those are the people that we should be like, oh, that's horrific. That's, you know, that's terrible content. But anyway, some people love it. Sorry, going on. After all these contest nerds said, I have to say, after all this Warzone 2 hate from all the pros and influencers, I just can't stand reading their tweets anymore. It's only complaining why they can't 1v4 anymore or don't get 40 kills every round because they get killed by some campers who are trying to have fun by winning a game they play for 8 hours a month. Yep, 100%. 100% agree. I realise that I complain about Call of Duty sometimes, and I always feel a bit bad when I do it, because I feel the same. I don't like seeing all of these videos of people just constantly complaining about Call of Duty and constantly like trying to pick apart everything that's wrong with it, and like, you know, trying to find new angles on like what's wrong with it so they can make more content because they know it gets good engagement by being negative about it. You know, if you don't like a game, just move on, do something else. The idea that these people are somehow saving Call of Duty by bringing attention to the issues, I just don't buy. I don't think that's right. I think it's just spreading negativity in the community, and it's a lot of ill-informed people riling up other ill-informed people, and then the people who do know what they're talking about, the developers, the people who work for these companies, can't defend themselves because, as I talked about, they can't break their contracts, they can't talk about a lot of the stuff that they would maybe like to otherwise. And so it just becomes this massive, weird echo box of hate. And I really despise it. I genuinely think that's what's ruined Warzone 2. I think when Warzone 2 came out, it was a very fun game. There was a lot of awesome stuff about it, lots of awesome ideas, and it would have got better if they'd just been allowed to carry on with their plan. But I think from as soon as they did COD Next, it all started going downhill. I think the people that went to COD Next, a lot of them were super toxic, and the way they talked about the game was really stupid and caused a lot of damage. And I think from then on, the game has been getting worse based on people trying to appease those people. I really think, I hope they never do something like COD Next again. I hope they don't. I would love it if whatever Call of Duty they release this year, they just put it out there. Just release it. Let us enjoy it. Fogger says, I'm a programmer. To fix a problem, you also have to understand the problem and what it affects. Telling someone to fix this and that without them understanding it in most cases will fail again. Yeah, 100% Fogger. Like, you know, I've seen people saying recently just like, oh, they should just like turn this gun off, or they should just like stop it crashing in ranked, or they should just like fix, you know, fix the, increase the server rate, the tick rate on the servers or whatever. And it's like, maybe that's really hard. Maybe that's almost an impossible thing to do. And if they did do that, they would have to break something else that's more valuable. You know, what if it's like, oh, okay, well, we could increase the server latency rate, but we've also got to make the map 20% smaller. Or we could do that, but we need to remove, you know, vehicles from the game or something. I genuinely think that's the kind of thing that's happening. I was like, oh, we can fix this, but that's going to mess up all the audio. Or we can fix this, you know, we can get rid of this gun, but that's also going to break the blueprint camo system or something like that. Like, I'm sure there's so many code dependencies and stuff that people like us can't possibly understand. Like, we have no idea how they're interwoven. And it's very easy to sit here when you've got no sort of horse in that race, you've got no stake in it. It's very simple to sit back and say, oh, well, it's easy. They just need to do this, this, and this, because you're not the one who has to do it. Like, it's always easy to be... It's the same thing as, you know, with the government. It's easy for me to sit here and criticize the government and say they should do this, this, and this, and this, because I don't have to do it. There's a brilliant game called Democracy. Maybe we'll play it sometime on stream. But it's a brilliant game where it's just about balancing government budgets and making decisions and stuff. And it, like, shows how interlinked things are and how basically there's some things that, like, it sounds like a good idea, but you don't think of all the consequences, all of the repercussions of it, and all the other things it would affect, and how it causes massive problems. It's really interesting. Anyway. You think they also you guarantee it's more complicated than your dev self. A simple sentence can be 2 months work. Yeah, I've seen like insane descriptions of how long it can take to change a typo in a subtitle and how it like affects so many other things and throws other things out of whack. Because again, so something like Call of Duty is pushing up against so many like tolerances where it's like, hey, if you're doing stuff so it's like this is exactly working out how much rendering time it takes to do this, and you're using the full budget in everything in terms of RAM and processing time and latency and whatever, MTU size and all of this stuff, and then you tweak something, it's like you have no idea what kind of cascade effect that could have of then pushing something over to the point where now the game crashes. Like, it's crazy what could happen. I mean, that's why there's so many weird glitches. Like, some of you might have seen when I was playing yesterday, a truck just started flying through the air for no reason. And it's like, I'm sure no one planned for that to happen, but something weird, funky went on. You think there's also a hey, this weapon is OP is deliberate for say 2 weeks before nerfing because it creates engagement with the game and gets more playtime until the next new weapon. I think new weapons are often made to be overpowered, Mark. So I think that's something that like if I was designing a game, I'd probably do that. You want the new gun to be used. You want it to be fun. So overbalance it a little bit so it's a bit better than other guns so people want to use it and stuff like that and people are excited about it, and then nerf it a bit. That just makes sense. I know people are always like, oh, well, then it sells more bundles and stuff like that, and they ignore all of the bundles for crap guns that are in the store because there's a lot of them. But yeah, I genuinely think it's just about like it makes new guns more exciting if they're a bit better than they should be, and it's better to like make them better and then nerf them a bit rather than make them, if a new gun comes out and it's useless, that's rubbish. Like imagine like a new season comes out, season 3 comes out and they add this new gun and they hype it up and then use it and you're like, nope, this is terrible. Then like that's an awful feeling. Like no one's going to enjoy it. No one's going to be like, well, good, I'm glad that gun came out and was too bad. So the alternative is they either make it just right, which is obviously super difficult, or they make it slightly too good, which they normally do. And I think that's the better choice. I think that makes sense. Ryan Reynolds Deadpool test footage. I mean, Ryan Reynolds is a different thing. Like that's become like a thing. Like people know like they're not real leaks. Like that's just part of that's the way they're marketing. It's like guerrilla marketing. That's a very different kind of thing, I think. Do you know what happened to the person who leaked the Battlefield 2042 stuff from the NDA event that you were at? Nope, no idea. I know they were taking it very seriously. We got lots of emails coming out being like, hey, someone's doing this, like you need to stop, here's the embargo rules. Like we need to, and they changed stuff, they pushed some stuff back, and they changed stuff when people, this basically, I got invited to an early access event or a few different events for Battlefield 2042. So we got to see the trailers early, then we got to play the game early and stuff like that. And every time they did one of these events, because they invited way more, they invited people like me who don't really play Battlefield. They invited loads of people. People leaked loads of it. Like people just, as soon as these events went up, people were posting screenshots and videos and stuff, sending them to Tom Henderson, and then he would like post all this stuff. And it's like, I know they know who did it. I know like they ended up saying, yep, we're aware who did it, blah, blah, blah. But they never managed to stop it entirely happening. So I think it was definitely more than one person. I think there's a lot of people who look up to people like Tom Henderson and want to impress him. So whatever. Yeah, Lackey's there. The leaks for Battlefield are all North American. I mean, wherever they're from, like it's just, I think they knew. Like I think EA and DICE knew what was happening, or they worked it out what was happening. And yeah, I do like obviously stuff like that's a bit hush hush. Like they don't tend to name and shame people for, I guess, professional reasons and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, like they did know, they were aware of it at least. We got emails saying that like, yeah, we know what's happening. Because obviously it affects all the other creators, all the people who are following the rules, like me and Lackey. Like we'd get invited to those events, and then when we see like leaks getting posted on the internet, I'll email my contact at EA and be like, hey, this is happening. Like, is the embargo finished now? Can we post our content? Because it sucks for us if we've made a video that has to go, live at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, and then 9 a.m. on Monday, someone posts all of the information that is going to be in our video. It kind of sucks for us. So we're like, hey, can we post our video now? And then weirdly, EA are always like, nope, wait until the embargo, 2 o'clock tomorrow. It's like, oh, sucks. But yeah. 100% regarding the last comment, content creators crying because of how the average person can kill them. Yeah, Amson. There's a weird thing that, like, I'm going to end this podcast here because I think that, like, I'm going to end on this note because I've said it loads of times and I'm going to keep on saying it. I think the biggest problem for Call of Duty, in terms of how toxic the creator side of it has become, and the fan base has become, and CDL has become, all of that side, I think is down to the perception of Call of Duty as a competitive game. And I think this weekend has actually brought that to light so much more. I've had more fun with Warzone 2 this weekend than I have in the entire rest of the time the game came out. Like, the totally normal April Fool's mode, whatever, has been so much fun. It's so silly, like jumping around, using the incendiary rounds, getting some wins, but also dying because sometimes you get thrown up in the air and sniped and stuff like that. It led to like so much laughter. I had loads of fun playing with Name Gear. We haven't played together for a bit. I had loads of fun playing with Flynn and with Jack Frags. We were having a ton of fun just enjoying it and enjoying the sort of chaos and the messing around stuff like that. And then I've seen a load of people complaining about it and saying it was terrible. And, you know, they're like, oh, it's unfair. Like, oh, you're just going to get killed straight away. You just get shot with incendiary rounds and there's nothing you can do about it, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I genuinely think at this point, Call of Duty can either be a super competitive game or it can be a fun game. And it's like, there's a group of people who I personally find very, very weird, who desperately want it to be a competitive game where they can prove that they're better at Call of Duty than everyone else. I find that super weird because I don't know who cares if you're really good at Call of Duty. Like, that seems an odd thing to care about for me. But I would much rather have a game that is loads of fun. And I know that, like, I'm at odds with a lot of the community on that. You know, I'm the same thing. I'm not trolling when I say I enjoyed the Krampus event. I really did enjoy the Krampus event. I thought it was super funny when you're in a fight and then suddenly the Krampus comes in and starts messing everything up. You hear those audio cues. That was super fun to me. I really enjoyed the Godzilla event. I really enjoyed Haunting of Verdansk. I enjoy Call of Duty when it throws competitive integrity kind of out of the window and is just like, let's have some fun. Let's have, you know, have a game where exciting things can happen and stories can happen and it's like something interesting. Personally, like, that's what I like about the game much more than, hey, yeah, I got like 4 more kills than this other person, therefore I'm a better Call of Duty player than them. Like, praise me for my amazing skills at this toy. I find that side of it weird. And I know a lot of the community, and, you know, I think there's lots of different facts in this, and a big part of it is the way they do the marketing from Call of Duty, to be honest. I think Call of Duty themselves are to blame for this. They've created this culture of Call of Duty being this super competitive game where being good at it is the only thing that matters, and getting, like, you know, high kill streaks or getting nukes or getting wins at Warzone or whatever, like, that's the only thing that matters. And I think it's bad for the game. I think it's bad for the enjoyment of the game. I think it's bad for the community. It just creates this weird toxicity and people get frustrated with it. People get angry about it and people don't have any fun with it. And it's just, I think it's a mess. It's very silly. I want to go back to when the game's just being like a bit of a laugh and being, you know, kind of fun and silly and stuff like that. You know, which I do think a lot of other games have managed to do very, very well. I think Firestorm did that very well. I think Blackout did that very well. I think Fortnite does that really well. You know, I know there are people that are super competitive about Fortnite, but those people are weird to me as well. I just don't want people to be so competitive about everything. Being silly in Warzone is much more fun. Anyway, I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for everyone who's been watching. I don't think I'm going to be streaming anymore today. I'm going to be making a couple of videos and things like that. But we will be back with a podcast tomorrow. Tomorrow, I want to talk about what we're kind of hoping for with Season 3, because I imagine we'll start hearing some stuff about that soon from Call of Duty, you know, official sources, not leaks. So hopefully we'll start hearing about that. So tomorrow we're going to do a bit of a talk on a podcast about what we want to see in Season 3 for Warzone and Call of Duty. So make sure you come back here tomorrow 9 AM, youtube.com/Geeky Pastimes, and I will see you then. Goodbye.